No man makes a greater mistake than someone who does nothing because they can only do a little. When we talk about active citizenship, a word that has become quite common, used, thrown around, what exactly does this mean? Active citizenship is something that is actually at the fundamental cornerstone of building a nation. And tonight, I hope that I will leave you with something to think about, something that you will go back home and you will start to action change in your own self. We live in a country, a day and an age where we have huge challenges. As a nation, we can't even write these scripts. Every single day, we're challenged with something new. But the important thing is for us to start to ask ourselves, how do we play our part? How do we start to engage in building our country? Democracy, freedom, and the rule of law are not given, they are won. And they need to be defended every single day. They need to be protected. As active citizens, I would ask you to think in the back of your mind, what does that mean to you? What do you do from your corner to lead every single day? We get up, we go to work, we do what we need to do, but that's not what being an engaged citizen is about. It's not about the work you do. It's not about what you're good at. It's about the things that we do that go over and above that. It's the things that we do to change the world that we live in, to change the very fabric of our society. And it's based on values. We would have to ask ourselves, what is the core value set that is important to us as individuals and to us as a nation? What is it that we want to be known for, not just as a South African, but as a country? So we have to ask ourselves, who are we? Do we show up? Do we truly arrive in every place we occupy? In our communities, how many of us know the name of our neighbors? How many of us know how many children live in the house next door or across the road? What school do they go to? How old are they? Because of the kind of social fabric we have and the challenges that we're faced with, we have locked ourselves in our homes behind high walls, gates, fences, and we have stopped being neighbors. We have stopped being communities. And yet this is really very fundamental because there's nobody that can change that for us except for ourselves. This is something we need to do. We have the responsibility to start building from the streets that we live on, take ownership of our communities. We need to start asking ourselves different kinds of questions because at the same time, while there are great challenges, and so many of the systems that are part of who we are as a nation are broken, are under immense stress, we're challenged by so many things. We must first ask ourselves the question, what is it that we're doing? What do we do every single day? When we think of democracy, when we think of being an engaged citizen, we mustn't just think of that one day that we get to vote. Because a citizen's role must start with a vote, not end with a vote. As South Africans, we're really, really good at demonstrating, going to protests, marching. And there have been so many things that we've needed to really voice our opinions on, really go out onto the streets in numbers to make a point. But I ask you, what happens after that protest? Where were you? What have you done to be a part of that discussion, to be a part of the narrative that then changes and fundamentally shifts, shapes, and builds our society? Because it's one thing to go to a march. It's one thing to protest. And unfortunately, South Africans have started to realize that it's only when there are violent protests that they do get the attention that they need and want. But we live in a society where our government is not able to cope with rebuilding that which we have broken down, that infrastructure which we need. But it has become such a common narrative. As South Africans, each and every one of us live in a suburb, a city, somewhere in this country. How many of you know the number of your ward where you live? And I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up, because I know what kind of demonstration I will have in hands. But how many of you know the name of the councillor in that very community where you live? And do you have his number or her number on your phone? We're really, really quick to be armchair critics who sit behind a Twitter handle and take pictures of running water, broken lights, and all of the things that don't work. The rubbish that wasn't collected, driving through the CBD, the shocking state of affairs there. We run to Twitter, social media, Facebook, but how many of us know how to log complaints? How to actually be an engaged and active citizen? Because at the core, we have the right to engage every single day with that very councillor that represents our needs. But we're not playing our part. We're not using the channels given to us to be able to do the things that build a community when we look at service delivery issues. And these are the kinds of things we need to start to engage. And like I say, we need to start asking ourselves different questions. Active citizenship is not a competition for who can do more and who can do the greatest thing in our community. It is a platform to bring people together, to say, what is it that you're really, really talented in? What can you do that's really exceptional? And how do you bring that to the very community and the very street that we live on? Some of you sitting in this room would be really exceptional at maths or science. You may not have any children of your own, but there could be 2 little children across the road that really need extra help with that maths or science before an exam. But if we don't know who those neighbors are, they just become the other. And what we lose out on is understanding that we need to start conceptualizing a sense of us. It's not only about shaping a nation and what it is that we want South Africa to look like, but what do we want a South African to look like? What is it that inspires you? And do you live that to your fullest every single day? Nobody makes a greater mistake than somebody who sits back and does nothing because they can only do a little. It's the small incremental changes of one individual that are so powerful that they can shift and change the world. 18 months ago, a young 16-year-old Swedish girl sat outside of her parliament in Sweden every single Friday. In the freezing cold temperatures of Sweden, she sat on the floor with a board and asked for her politicians to stand up and notice and to do something about climate change. That one young individual is an example that it just takes the belief of one to change the world. Young Greta Thunberg was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year in December for 2019. And she has erupted climate marches around the world, bringing attention to something that is so crucially important. And yet, it was just the power of one, something that we somehow forget. We live in our bubbles and we live in our own worlds. We are all under immense pressure, and so we forget that we're a part of a collective. Our communities and building South Africa is each and every one of us, not only a duty but a responsibility. For any of you who have traveled, even if you just go to Google and look at the world through that lens, you will know that we live in the most incredible country on earth. But this very country needs every single citizen, because right now, South Africa is at a tipping point. It can go either way. But it's the dedication of the individuals in every community that are going to shape what the narrative of the next 5, 10, and 20 years is. It is for us to start thinking about things differently. When we think about citizenship, it's not just about volunteering in our very communities and trying to understand what it is that we can give of ourselves. We don't have civic education. That's something that we need to make sure that we don't only give thought to, but we need to start doing that at home. How do we establish a set of values that we share with our direct community? What kind of conversations do we allow to happen in our personal spaces? Because it's those conversations that shape the world that we live in. And it is those conversations that start to build the fabric of the community that we are as a nation. When we think of all of the things that equate to building a community, to being an active citizen, it's not only about participation in political structures. I would ask you, how many of you have gone to a ratepayers meeting? How many of you are part of your neighborhood watch or crime watch unit that's in your community? How many of you go to the city's meetings? I think very few. So if we don't participate, how can we expect our government to work for us? It's important that we understand we're equally important in that equation. How many of you watch the news and really understand and listen to what's going on in our country? Not just when there's a SONA or a budget speech or chaos in Parliament. How many of us really understand what is going on? We're quick to point fingers, but we have to start to ask ourselves, what is it that we're doing from the corners where we live? What do we do every day to show up and to change one thing? In many of the communities where I work, I've used something as simple as a community cleanup to engage and to bring people out. A cleanup's not going to change the waste issues that we have. It's not going to stop littering. But what it does do is it brings people together. It allows you to get to know the person that actually lives in the house next to you. It gets you to understand who the people are that form the community where you come from. And you get to learn that so many of the challenges that we're faced with as individuals in our own bubble are not unique to us. They're faced by the person sitting next to you, the person behind you. Each and every one of us has a story to tell, and so much that we can learn from each other, yet we shut ourselves off from connecting with other people. And we can blame society, and we can blame the kind of social construct of our country. The inequality in our country has created divides that are unacceptable. But I ask of each of you, I implore you to think about what it is that you can do when you go back home and tomorrow you wake up. What is the one thing that you will do differently? I know when I drive every single day on the very same road, I stop at the same robot not far from where I live. And there is a gentleman who stands at that robot every single day, and he's probably been there for at least 10 years. I'm sure this is a very similar situation for many of you who pass a woman who's got a child, who pass a young boy who is not at school, who's on that very corner. Come summer, rain, winter, that same person is there. How many of us know his name? How many of us know her story? How many of us understand why it is that she's sitting on a corner with a baby? And I'm not talking about, the stories of people who are trafficking children and those isolated incidents. But I'm talking about those individuals that we know their faces, we know exactly where they stand, what time they're there, what time they leave. They form part of the very community that we live in. But yet we have not extended ourselves to rolling down that window instead of just going like this and looking away. We don't make eye contact. It's these very small things that become the absolute foundation and the pieces of the puzzle in order for us to build our nation. They may sound very small and insignificant, but when we start to engage at a level of community where we live, when we start to lead without a title and without a corner office and a position in some company, and we start to lead purely because we lead from a place that we have decided to be deliberate about doing the small things every single day to build South Africa, it is then that we will start to have great impact. It's important that when we look at our country and where we stand right now, that we ask ourselves, what is it that we will do so that 10 years from now, we have indeed changed and shaped a narrative that is different. History will judge us for what we do right now, and it does rely on every single citizen to be a part of building our nation. Our standing nation requires the dedication of every single citizen. And no, our responsibility is not just to go to the polls. We must be engaged in the electoral system, and in fact, I would say we have to be engaged in changing our electoral system. But what are you doing from the corner where you live, and what do you do to lead as you wake every day? South Africa is ours. It is for us to shape and mold. We must never forget where we have come from, and we must be determined to understand our history. And we must understand it as a collective in order for us to be able to build a future and a vision for the kind of not only the country we want, not only what do we want South Africa to look like, but what do we want a South African to look like? Ask yourselves, what is it that you can do? Because no man makes a greater mistake than he who does nothing because he could only do a little. Thank you.